Never look back. The real-life zombie horror that shook Miami, the man screams echoed to the hot Miami air as cars swerved and brakes screeched on the highway ramp. People froze, not knowing whether to run or call for help. In the middle of the road, under the blazing summer sun, a man was crouched over another, his body shaking, his hands locked tightly around his victim. His face was covered in blood, his eyes wide open, wild, and empty like he wasn't even human anymore. A witness yelled, "Hey, stop! What are you doing?" But the man didn't stop. He didn't even look up. He just kept moving, slow and strange, like something inside him had broken. When the police arrived, they shouted for him to get off the victim. The man didn't respond. He growled a deep, awful sound that made even the officers hesitate. One officer fired a warning shot, but it didn't scare him. He turned his head slowly, blood dripping from his mouth, and for a moment his eyes locked onto theirs. They weren't the eyes of a man anymore. They were the eyes of something else. The next few seconds were chaos shouts, the crack of gunfire and the sound of sirens. When it was over, the attacker lay still. But the officers who were there swore they saw something move, something that made one of them whisper later, "Whatever that was, it wasn't over." That was the day Miami learned the phrase, "never look back." And that's where this story begins. 2 weeks earlier, the city had been boiling in record-breaking heat. The nights were humid, the air heavy, and people couldn't sleep. News reports talked about strange behavior all across downtown, people acting lost, wandering barefoot, talking to themselves. But no one paid much attention. It was Miami. Weird things happen all the time. Ethan, behind them, on that quiet street, the humming started again. But this time, it wasn't one voice. It was many low, slow, and growing louder, like a song the city was never meant to hear. And then, in the dark, something moved. The Miami night was thick with heat and silence. Ethan and Lisa ran to the empty streets, their footsteps echoing against the concrete walls. The sound of sirens grew faint behind them, replaced by something else, a soft, rhythmic thumping, like bare feet slapping against pavement. Lisa gasped for breath. "Ethan, what's happening?" What was wrong with Danny? Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind was racing. Every streetlight they passed flickered, and every shadow seemed to move. When they finally stopped beside an old gas station, Lisa collapsed against the wall, trembling. "We have to call the police," she whispered. Ethan nodded and pulled out his phone, but there was no signal. Just a blinking message that said network unavailable. He frowned. That doesn't make sense. We're in the middle of the city. Lisa looked around nervously. "Ethan, do you hear that?" At first, he didn't. But then he noticed that the same low humming sound he'd heard before, coming from somewhere close. It was strange, like a tune with no words, just a deep, steady hum that made the hairs on his arms stand up. "Get inside," he said quickly, grabbing her hand. They ran into the gas station, pushing through the broken glass door. Inside, it smelled of gasoline and dust. The lights flickered weakly, and a radio behind the counter played static. Ethan picked up the receiver to call for help, but the line was dead. Suddenly, the static changed. A voice crackled through distorted and low. "Do not look back. Whatever you do, don't look back." Lisa's eyes widened. "Ethan, did you hear that?" Before he could answer, something slammed against the glass door they'd come through. They froze. Then another bang, louder this time. Ethan peeked through a crack between the shelves. 3 figures were outside, swaying slowly under the neon light. Their clothes were torn, their skin slick with sweat and dirt. One of them, the tallest, had blood smeared across his mouth. They weren't shouting or talking. They were just staring. The highway stretched into darkness as Ethan's car tore through the night. The only light came from the headlights, cutting a shaky path through smoke and shadows. Lisa gripped the dashboard, her knuckles white. "Where are we going?" She shouted over the roaring engine. "Out of the city." Ethan yelled back, "We just have to get away." But deep down, he wasn't sure there was a way out anymore. In the rear-view mirror, he could still see the shapes, dozens of them running after the car. They moved fast, far too fast for what they were. One of them darted into the road behind them, its face twisted, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Ethan pressed harder on the gas, the speedometer needle trembling. They crossed the bridge leading away from downtown Miami, the city behind them now a faint orange glow of fires and chaos. The air smelled like salt and smoke. Lisa looked out the window and gasped. Ethan, the water. He glanced over and froze. The bay below was moving, rippling unnaturally like the ocean was alive. Pale hands reached up from the surface, hundreds of them, followed by faces breaking through the water, gasping soundlessly as if returning from the dead. The humming sound rose again, low and deep, vibrating through the metal of the bridge. Ethan clenched the wheel. "Don't look, Lisa. Don't." But she couldn't stop staring. One of the faces turned upward, locking eyes with her through the car window. Its skin was gray, stretched tight over bone, its mouth opening wide in a silent scream. Lisa let out a cry, covering her face. "They're in the water, Ethan. They're coming up." He pressed the accelerator again, trying to get across the bridge. The car bounced and rattled over the uneven road. Just as they neared the other side, something slammed against the car's side door hard. Ethan lost control for a second, the car swerving dangerously close to the edge. Another bang followed, this time on the roof. Lisa screamed as a dark shape dropped onto the hood. Its hand smashed against the windshield, leaving bloody streaks as it clawed at the glass. Ethan hit the brakes, skidding to a stop. The creature slid off the hood and fell onto the road, twitching and hissing. For a moment, Ethan and Lisa just sat there, breathing hard, the car's engine humming softly. Then, from the far end of the bridge, headlights appeared. A police car. Its siren wailed faintly as it approached. Ethan honked, waving frantically. "Hey! Hey! We're alive! Stop!" The cruiser pulled up beside them. A lone officer stepped out, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. "You two all right?" he called out. Ethan nodded, relief washing over him. "Thank God you have to help us. There are things, people, whatever they are, they're all over the city." The officer's face was pale and sweaty. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I've seen them. They're everywhere." He looked over his shoulder nervously, then motioned for them to follow. There's a shelter set up at the old freight station past the bridge. People started running. The station filled with screams and chaos. Lisa clung to Ethan as he pulled her toward the back exit. "Come on," he yelled. They shoved through the crowd, stepping over fallen crates and broken glass. Behind them, the door finally gave way. The creatures poured in, dozens of them, moving in that same jerky, unnatural rhythm, their eyes glowing in the red light. Ethan and Lisa burst through the back door into the train yard. The night air hit them like fire, thick with the smell of smoke and salt. In the distance, the ocean glimmered faintly under the moon, and from it came a wave of movement. More figures rising from the water, climbing onto the shore. Lisa turned to Ethan, tears streaming down her face. "There's nowhere left to go." Ethan looked around desperately, spotting an old freight train idling on the tracks. Its lights were still on. "There," he said, pointing. "If we can get it moving." They ran toward it, dodging the creatures spilling into yard. Ethan climbed into the engine car and searched the controls. He found the ignition switch and twisted it. The engine roared to life. Lisa stumbled in beside him, slamming the door shut just as a hand slapped against the glass. The creatures surrounded the train, banging on the metal, their faces pressed against the windows. Ethan pushed the throttle forward. The wheels screeched, sparks flying, and slowly the train began to move. As they pulled away from the station, the humming grew louder, chasing them into the night. The city lights vanished behind them, replaced by endless darkness. Lisa collapsed into the seat beside him, shaking. "Ethan, what if it follows us?" He didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the tracks ahead, long, empty, stretching into nowhere. But as the train rumbled into the countryside, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Up ahead, along the tracks, dozens of figures were already standing motionless, waiting, their pale faces turned toward the train. And then, in the distance, the low hum began again. This time, it came from every direction,